And really, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rita Breidenbach. I'm in the Faculty Center for Innovation, Collaboration, and Support. Really delighted. This is the first in a series of faculty sharing practices, one or two practices that they want to share with their community of fellow faculty. And as I said, I hope that this will lead to a repository of relatively short videos, 10, 20 minutes, that on specific topics that faculty will be able to view on their own time and as they choose and need. Really delighted to have Matt Whitman from Parsons be our first, I don't want to call you a presenter, I want to call you a sharer. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who's here. Really, it's really just heartwarming to be able to share practices and things that have worked well. And what I wanted to share today really relates to kind of going back in a lot of ways to what we were trying to sort of cover as we were teaching online, right? Like finding these ways to give meaningful interactions to students with us as faculty, finding ways to give feedback to them that didn't involve writing out comments and having this sort of faceless interaction, and bringing that into where we are now, which is we are meeting our students in person. We have that sense of on-campus community again. And I think for me personally, one of the things that I've really been drawn to just in being back in person is really maximizing the time that I have with my students face to face in class, for things like, getting to just interact with them as their faculty, but mostly actually giving them time to interact with each other and have that really important kind of like peer-to-peer interaction. And so one thing I've done, and I started this really in the fall of last year when we first moved back to on campus, was using a tool that I came to really rely on when we were teaching online, which is a tool called Loom, which I'm not sure if folks are familiar with already. And by the way, as we do this, if you have questions, please like stop me. And, I also want to leave time, sort of like half of the time at the end, just for like questions and things that people are wondering. But this is a tool that I've really kind of hung on to and continue to use pretty regularly in my classes, specifically for the purposes of giving feedback and really like kind of qualitative feedback that I might otherwise have given in person in a critique, standing up in front of students, students presenting their work, we share, students interact and talk with each other. But in instances where I really want to ask students to kind of just share with each other and have sort of more private moments in a way where I'm not there to sort of observe their feedback necessarily, this is a tool that I use to, after they've given each other peer feedback in class and had that, they're talking, they're laughing, they're having a good time. And then I can go in afterwards once they've submitted their final works and give them my in-depth feedback. This tool and what I want to share with you is also, it comes from my experience as a dyslexic. I've found it really challenging over the years to do written feedback for students, in that it really takes me a long time. Like I can end up spending about like 30 or 40 minutes just writing feedback for one student, just making sure I've gotten all of the, spelling errors and things checked. And so this is where using this kind of recorded feedback, and we'll look at a few ways that you can do it. I show my face in it, but you don't have to. This is something that's also just helped me and really helped my time as a faculty member and allowed me to do other things like planning and all the other things that we do as faculty. So I'm going to share my screen if that's all right. And what I have in front of me is actually my kind of library. Oh, I think I think it's just a
Are
permission.
you able to share?
It's saying it's been disabled. It might be
I'm going to see if I can make you a co-host.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. And David, I saw your comment in the chat. No worries, no worries. I know we're all going between meetings, so glad you can be here. Okay, I'm just gonna share my entire desktop. Um, so this is sorry for like the kind of frozen faces and things, sort of awkward facial positions, but this is what Loom, this tool, looks like. And I'll show you also how to record and how to use it sort of more practically. And again, please use the hand raise function or just grab my attention if you want me to repeat anything or go back. But this is, you can see some of them are fairly recent. These are all of the different project feedbacks that I've recorded for my students, going back to like 2020. And all of them are short. They're like 5, 6, sometimes some of the longer ones I found, when a student has, like a lot of, maybe questions that have come up in their work or things that I'm maybe sort of wanting to address, or even just like a lot of references. But I tend to keep them short. And I found also in doing this, and this is in particular with like, in our role as giving really meaningful and constructive feedback to students, sometimes when I've written things in my comments in Canvas, which has that sort of, that comment function, I found that students will sometimes even ask like, well, what was wrong with this? Or like, even kind of the things that I've written, because they don't have my tone of voice, they don't have my face there. They sometimes seem even like harsher than I even mean them to be. And so this has been also a really good way of just even like tempering some of that, the challenges and things that, don't come across necessarily in written feedback. So I show my face in all of these just so they can see, I wave at them. If you scroll over all of these, you get like a little bit of a preview of them as well. But these are private to each student. These are really just kind of private, unlisted videos, basically. And there's a little link with each video that allows you to literally copy and paste that link directly into Canvas. And so the student basically has this sort of like private video where you can talk about their work, you can give them suggestions, feedback, whatnot. I've used this also even in conjunction with critiques that we've done live as a group where, I have a few things that I thought of after they showed their work and I just want to, send them something, or even to like address things that came up in the critique. If a student had like maybe a kind of challenging critique, this is also a really good way of kind of coming back to them and, talking about it, giving them additional support, feedback. In first year right now, this is kind of separate from project feedback, but another really useful way that you could use this, which I'm not using at the moment, but to meet with students and give them sort of one-on-one feedback, sometimes there's not really time and space for that in, just the way the semester's planned to do it in person in class, or even, via Zoom. And this is also for folks who are looking for a way to, give that kind of, rather than having to write it out, giving that asynchronous but sort of very personal feedback to a student on their standing in the class, their performance, issues that need to be addressed, things like that. This is also a really good way of doing that. And during the pandemic, when we were online, this is how I did all of that kind of midterm, mid-semester check-in work. Because again, it just gives them something more than just text. I found, and even, in my time as a student, there is something that feels sometimes very cold or clinical about just seeing text feedback, especially if you're not really, you don't know the person quite well yet. And so this just kind of adds, I think, a layer of warmth to the process. I'd also like to show you just what it looks like on the student side, just so you can kind of get a sense of what students see when they encounter one of these recordings. So I'm going to go over to put that. Well, let me do this. Just gonna open this as I thought I had it open. Apologies. Let me just pop back here. This is actually good. You can see where and how the videos are shared. So I'm just copying over a link. And so the students can only see this if they have that direct link to the video. And so this is what the student will see when they click on the video. They can play it. Hey, Karen, I wanted to leave you some feedback here. Sorry, just so you can see it plays. There are, and this is something that's actually improved a lot since I first started using this tool in 2020. There are now closed captions, which is great. It's an auto closed caption, so it's not all, it doesn't get everything right, but it's pretty good. And there's also a transcript. So the student can actually see the entirety of your conversation, the things that well, not conversation, your sort of monologue, and the things that you're saying here, they can use it to navigate. It also made me realize how many times I say and ah and all of that. But this is stuff also that you can turn off. If you don't want to have a transcript of what you're recording, you can turn this off. You can also correct it, which I'll show you in a second. But the student's able to keep this. They can keep it as a link. I put it directly in Canvas as a comment, just because I find that, sort of that gives them sort of an accountability too with where their grade is posted. They can see that. The other thing too that is really helpful, and I'm going to go back to my instructor view, I can also see if a student's viewed it. So like this, is a good way also, just again, in terms of accountability, making sure that a student's viewed your feedback, they're aware of, what you've offered to them in terms of critique and suggestions and whatnot. But if I want to do any kind of like customization with this, one thing that I can do, I have the option to do things like turn off comments, turn off analytics, turn off the transcript. So again, like depending on your level of comfort and what you want students to have access to in this kind of tool, you can customize that. And these are also things that you can save as like blanket settings across the board, so that all your videos, either, for instance, making it so that a student can't download the video, you can set that as sort of a default. So again, it's all kind of customizable in that way. And with that transcript, for instance, with this student, as you can see, it misspelled her name. So I can go back and, if there are things I want to correct in here, or, sometimes it's gotten like artist names wrong and things like that, I can go back and just quickly kind of tidy up everything that's here in this transcript. So that's I mean, this is a really, really kind of like quick and, sort of rough approach to just introducing this tool, which you can go way into depth with, including inviting students to use it as well. But I did want to show you just how it works, just like on a really kind of quick basis, just so you can sort of see and maybe find for your particular courses how this might be useful. And this also gives me a chance to not have to look at myself perpetually waving. When you download Loom, it's an app that lives on your desktop. By the way, it's for educators. It's free generally. It's free for anyone to download and to use and to make videos on. But if you are an educator with a .edu email address, you can automatically get their sort of premium version of their their software, and also the account, which allows you to have like unlimited videos, I think. It gives you like a certain number of people you can share it with too. So if you are going to use this, I highly recommend just signing up using your newschool.edu email address, because you get sort of the premium side of what they offer as an educator. And I think students do as well. So when you open it up, what you'll see is there is a little, by default, it shows my face. So I have this little sort of icon of me that I can move around. I can, if I want to, if I'm just speaking to students, which is what you saw in those videos, what I can do is I can just show my camera, which gives me this sort of view. And I put it up here next to where my webcam is. So it looks like I'm, sort of looking at the student in a way. That's something that I tend to do just with the way I use this. You don't have to have your camera on though. You can turn your camera off and just do a recording that has your voice. And this is really useful too if you're grading work, for instance, or if a student submitted something digitally or like a 2D piece. you could show your screen only. So, I could pull up my students' work here in Adobe Acrobat or in Canvas directly, and then record and give feedback. And, they wouldn't necessarily have to see my face, but they could hear what I'm saying. I'm just going to do a quick recording here just so you can also see what happens when I start to record. So it gives me that little countdown. And over here, there's a little stop button, which just allows me to stop the recording. But the one I wanted to show you, which I think you might find potentially helpful, depending again on what you're teaching, is there's this draw function as well. And this is also new. So if I wanted to temporarily call, a student's attention to some part of their work or their drawing, you have this really handy kind of tool just to allow for, those kinds of sort of pointing things out on a screen. And also there's also this kind of click option too, right? So you can see if I wanted to click even on a part of a student's website that they were designing, they would be able to see sort of my interaction with that. I also use this for tutorials. That's sort of a whole different conversation, but that's also where some of these more kind of functionality tools tend to be sort of helpful. Functionality in the sense of interacting with a student's work. So when I stop recording, it automatically saves that video. And it lets you give it a name. You can, if you want to, you can just share it directly once you've given it a name just by going to share. And then copying the link, and then that's how you get it into Canvas. There are all kinds of settings that you can change just in terms of accessibility to the link and to the recording, but by default these are only viewable to people that have that link. So this is also just a really good way to make sure that of course only the student can view their feedback. But if you wanted to record a class message or something like that, you could equally, just share the link. You can embed it directly into Canvas as well. So I do my introduction videos before the semester starts this way. And so they just, they can kind of see my face before we meet for the first time. And so this is, again, sort of I think a really useful way to also consider it, even if not for feedback and for, even kind of, one-on-one, what would have been one-on-one meetings with students at mid-semester, something else that you might consider, even if you just want to sort of dip your toes into using this asynchronous tool. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second because I know that this is a lot of me talking, and I see the chat is lighting up. So maybe it's a good time to go over to the chat. Katrin wrote, does the new school have an account with Loom? No, but you, as a faculty member, just with a .edu email address, you can get a sort of premium account with it. So it's really sort of an individual faculty thing. As far as I know, that maybe that's changing, but that's sort of where it stands at the moment. David asked, when you correct the transcript, does it also correct the captioning? Yes, those two things are interlinked. So the captions are reflective of the transcript and the transcript of the captions. Wahat said, hi everyone, I'm an instructional designer in the distributed education online learning team. Loom has been a lifesaver for me in assisting faculty. Cool. Yeah. And if you have suggestions too, if folks want to chime in the chat too with anything that they found really helpful, please just jump in the chat and post anything there that you want us to know. So yeah, thanks for the people who jumped into the chat. I wanted to just open it up really now to questions, and to let folks, if there's things that you're wondering or stuff that I didn't cover, please, I'm here. I'm not paid by Loom, I promise. I'm just sort of a proponent of this as a tool. Yeah, Katrin, and please correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
You pronounce my name perfectly. Can you use it for students to leave feedback for each other?
You can, however, students would need to make an account. So that's something that I haven't experimented with that yet. I have students leave little emoji reactions, but you could have students create an account, and yeah, they can record videos, they can embed and do the exact same things that you can do as a faculty member.
Brilliant.
Just one note on the question about the university having access. 2 years ago, we didn't have Mural as an add-in. So as technology becomes adopted, we can make a case for the university to actually create through a university account. And that would also get at the can students use it. So the more adopters in some ways, the better.
Yeah, Jenny.
Can you copy the transcript and then place that in a written document as well?
That's a great question. I've never actually done that, but you can edit the transcript. So I imagine yes.
You could probably copy.
Yes, I imagine so, but I've never actually done that.
Okay.
Now that I think about it.
Maybe I'm going to try it after our meeting.
Yeah. Also, this is unrelated to Loom, but one thing that's new within Canvas, I think, from what I've seen in my own updates, is there is now in comments, there is directly in Canvas, there is a voice to text option to put feedback in there. For some reason, it only works when I'm in Chrome or Firefox, not Safari. I don't know what that is, but that also is an option too. That's like doesn't require Loom or anything. That's built into Canvas. And voice thread would be a good option to explore for setting up a space. Thank you for that. Thank you. Other questions or things that you would want me to maybe show again, or?
I just had one note. I've used it before to like show a demo for something in class, and then I did that in a Zoom period, but it came in handy for when students miss something in class.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. And there's also like, I think when I've had students now with COVID, who've had to miss class, like right now we're teaching Adobe Premiere in the time class in first year, and that's like super, like it builds on everything. And so just having like kind of a library of recordings that are like project specific, yeah, like for a student who's absent or you need them to get caught up, it really is handy in that way too. Laura.
This is really great. Thank you so much. One question I have is I'm wondering if you've noticed a difference in the feedback that you're giving, if Loom kind of shapes your feedback in a way that you weren't expecting or that you find beneficial.
Yeah, it does. I've found that like certainly when I'm like when I'm standing in front of my 18 students, I'm really kind of like, I'm conscious of, also like how much time I'm taking up within that space with, just the students there. And, I want them to be able to talk to each other and give each other feedback. And so I tend to think of like more artist references and things in this space, just because also I'm doing it at home. So like, I'm just kind of, I'm not on in the same way that I am when I'm in front of students. And that's something where I can kind of go into more depth. Someone mentioned in the chat, it kind of lets you ramble and record. That's like, I mean, that's so true, like it does, it really kind of lets you sort of like think out loud in a way. And I felt sort of shows students also how we give feedback, like they're seeing me kind of come up with it in real time. I do look at their projects before I hit record, and like I have things that I'm going to say and I sort of write down a few points, but from there too, I also just kind of let things come into mind. Sometimes I'll think of an artist on the spot and I'll just say like, I can't remember the name right now, but I'll put it in the comments in Canvas and then they have that as well. So yeah, totally. And the more I've used it too, I've found that. Yeah.
And the student response, how have the students embraced the process?
They've loved it. That it's been, I mean, there are some students who just like it's sort of like a baseline for them, and so they're just they're like, okay, great, that was my feedback. But I've had a lot of students, especially ones that in the class that I teach time, a lot of students will come to it with like a sort of aversion to some of the technical parts of the work. They're more interested in sort of the tactile hands-on stuff, and so using InDesign Premiere is a little bit of a challenge. And I think that that's something where with those kinds of students in particular that are more sort of technology averse in some ways, they appreciate having, and they've told me, they appreciate just having this like video recorded for them, also as like an archive. That's the other thing too that I've heard is that, students have said like, like I saved your video and went back to it when I, was kind of like feeling a little low about my work after a, a rough critique. And it was a nice reminder of, some of the things you said. So it's that too. I think that's one of the reactions I've seen too. Other questions or anything? Oh yeah, yes, thank you. Wahaj, Wahat, please correct. I'm so sorry.
It's Wajahat.
Wajahat, thank you for sharing in the chat the Premium Educator Access. These are really great resources. And you just need a .edu email address to sign up for it. And they're pretty quick. Yeah, one or 2 days for full access. Anything else, or any other questions that folks are wondering about? Or I mean, you could also use this like not even just with students, I imagine. I mean, you could use this as a way of recording videos really for, for people that you work with on a team or faculty. I mean, just video messages generally, I've found myself have been kind of like a warmer way of, just addressing a group of people sometimes when you can't all meet together. So yeah, I would love, for people who are here and have ways of using this that, you find work well, or things that you're finding it useful for, please like share. And, it'd be great to hear what people do in the future with it. Yeah. Hey, hello.
Hi. I was lucky to have a one-on-one with Matt to learn how to use this. So it's been a valuable tool from, working online to still being able to use these videos. And I like that my little face is showing as I look up and I'm talking, because that also makes it more personal, because I do a lot of digital tutorials, and sometimes I'll do them specifically for a student, and you can move yourself around, but they'll see you speaking, and I find that's more personal. Anyway, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Totally. And that's a really good point too. If you're doing like even like drawing kind of work or stuff where you need a camera to like point downwards, this is again a thing. The camera doesn't have to be pointed at your face even. You could, depending on your setup, you could have a camera pointed at like a workstation, or, something that you're doing with your hands. And, there's so many different uses that you can have just in terms of, again, like showing students where you are, or, like drawing them to a particular part of, something that you have in front of you that, is a tutorial kind of thing.
This was fantastic, Matt. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Really, really helpful.
Thank you.
And look out for the recording.
Yes.